Hey, welcome to Gen X Amplified episode number 2, where we're going to talk about building your personal brand, how to stand out through all the noise, and coming up with that great breakthrough idea. So are you ready? Let's do it.
How do you then establish yourself as being one of the best? How do you establish yourself as an expert or as a go-to person or as someone who is really, really valuable in your company?
Welcome to Gen X Amplified, where we bring you inspirational and entertaining conversations with successful Gen X leaders and entrepreneurs.
This is the show created just for you. The powerful generation between the boomers and millennials to help you amplify your story,
Maximize your impact,
and become Gen Exceptional in business and in life.
Now, here's your host, Adrian Porter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gen X Amplified. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited today. I'm always excited about my episodes, but today is very special because I've been looking forward to this interview for a long time for many personal reasons. My guest today is a marketing strategist, branding expert, professional speaker, consultant, and frequent contributor to a few publications you may have heard of, such as Forbes, Harvard Business Review, and Entrepreneur. She was, in fact, recognized in Forbes as one of the 25 professional networking experts to watch in 2015. She is the author of 2 best-selling books, Reinventing You, Define Your Brand, Imagine Your Future, and her most recent book, Stand Out, How to Find Your Breakthrough Idea and Build a Following Around It. Everyone, please welcome aboard my Gen Exceptional guest, Dorie Clark. Dorie.
Adrian, thank you so much for having me. Great to talk with you.
Likewise. I'm really excited. I was saying this earlier in the intro. When I just started this entrepreneurial journey, I stumbled on your book, Reinventing You, and I tell you, it was a game changer for me. And so a lot of the principles that were outlined really applied to what I was doing. And then I recently read your book, Stand Out. So I'll tell you, this is really exciting for me. Thank you for being on Gen X Amplified.
Oh, that's so cool. Thank you. I'm really glad that you enjoyed the books.
Awesome. So I definitely want to dive more into your latest book, Stand Out. And again, especially for this audience, I think it's so applicable and relevant because as you, Dorie, I'm sure you know, many Gen X leaders, entrepreneurs, and those are kind of looking to either start a business or redefine who they are in the workforce, they're really feeling stuck and they're not sure really how to find that strength of their personal story. So I would love to dig in deep, but first I want to just have you briefly take us back to your own personal Dorie story, if you will, and how your experience and your expertise led to this current journey of standing out.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So briefly, my story is, so I think so much in our careers is contingent on timing and sometimes larger demographic trends, actually. Mm-hmm. And so in some ways, my story is maybe a typical Gen X one. After I finished graduate school, my first job was as a newspaper reporter. And I was really excited. I thought that was going to be a great career for me. But about a year into my career as a journalist, I got laid off. Mm-hmm. And it was totally unexpected for me. It was 2001. And really up until that point, the news industry had just been chugging. I mean, literally up until about 2000, that was the peak of profitability in the entire history of newspapers.
Right.
But it was just starting the tremors of the internet. And over the course of the next decade, nearly 40% of American newsroom journalists would lose their jobs. And so the reason I'm not a journalist today in a lot of ways was because of that quirk of timing. And so I had to reinvent myself. And I think rather inadvertently was on the vanguard of the emerging freelance economy and, having multiple careers, finding new ways to do things, to support myself. And so after I left journalism, I got a job, actually a couple of jobs, working in politics as a political spokesperson. Those for governor's race in Massachusetts and for a presidential campaign. Unfortunately, both of my candidates lost, and so that's why I'm not doing that. And I then became a nonprofit executive director for a couple of years, and that was an interesting experience for me because it actually. Ironically, most people wouldn't necessarily see this as a clear path, but running this small nonprofit really awakened the entrepreneurial spark in me because as I was doing it, it was sort of unexpected, but I just had this revelation. Oh, this is exactly like running a small business. I could do this for myself. And so after about a year, I got the idea to start my own business. And I continued for one more year running the nonprofit and essentially on the side trying to learn and educate myself and take classes so that I could be an effective entrepreneur once I made the leap. And so for the past 9 years, then, I've had my own business doing marketing strategy consulting. And as part of that, I write books like Stand Out and Reinventing You. I blog pretty frequently for places like the Harvard Business Review and Entrepreneur and Time. And I give speeches and I teach business school.
Oh, wow. Which business school are you teaching in?
I've taught for a lot of different ones, but my primary affiliation is with the Fuqua School of Business at Duke.
Oh, yeah, Fuqua. Okay. Yeah, it's have a lot of friends that went to B-School there. Great school.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned, this is a good point. You mentioned earlier about the freelance economy, which it's a lot of people talk about that. And that's definitely been a kind of a transitional shift as far as the workforce. Can you speak a little bit more about how do you define the freelance economy, and why do you think that is the case now versus the way people are employing jobs in the past?
Well, I think the one study that has really stood out for me as being prescient and encapsulating the trend well is one that came out a couple of years ago from Intuit. And they actually estimate that by 2020, which is not that far away, 40% of the American workforce will be freelance or contractors.
Wow.
This is a incredibly rapidly growing trend.
Right.
And what accounts for it? I mean, I think at a very basic level, it's the fact that that companies are smart and they know that it is cheaper to hire contractors than it is to have people on the payroll and have to deal with benefits and have to deal with healthcare and have to suck it up if there's downtime in between when they really need somebody.
Right.
And so as a result of that, they're shifting risk onto workers. And as with all things, that's really good for some people, and that's not so good for other people. But I do think it's an inexorable trend, and we have to learn how to navigate that as individual professionals.
No, definitely, we definitely do. Now, when you in 2001, when you were laid off, I believe you said it was 2001. How did that affect your confidence? And did you feel like, oh crap, what do I do now? Or did you just at that point just really start to hit the ground running?
Well, I was definitely pretty traumatized by it, partly because the day that they chose to lay me off in sort of this just colossal bad luck for a news organization was they decided to lay me off on Monday, September 10th, 2001.
Oh, wow. So, okay, the day before.
Yeah, and so I woke up the next morning, and I'm sure that they retrospectively probably would have liked to have another reporter on staff, at least for another week, because it was kind of a big news day in Boston, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
But I woke up and I didn't have a job. And then all of a sudden we have this crazy, unprecedented national tragedy. The economy literally goes to a standstill. It's like days and weeks until the stock market starts running again, until planes start flying again. There are massive layoffs. I mean, the economy really had convulsions as a result. And you couple that with already the sort of mild recession and economic pressures that the newspaper industry was facing. And I thought, oh man, how am I ever going to get another job in this climate. But so my response really was, I was nervous, and so I threw myself into freelance work. I knew I needed to support myself, and so I just started freelancing like a maniac. And that was actually my first taste, really, of entrepreneurship in kind of a micro sense, because I certainly didn't think of myself as an entrepreneur at that point. It was really more like, oh, I'm a freelance journalist. That's just a different form of being a journalist. But I mean, fundamentally, you have clients, your editors, and you're pitching them ideas. And anytime, if you want to be successful, you have to really crack the code about, all right, what does the customer want? And how do I make sure I give it to him when he wants it? And I think that was actually really helpful training for me in terms of figuring out how to run a business and, tasting the idea that you could be rewarded if you got particularly good at figuring out how to please your customer.
No, I'm glad you said that. That's really important. A lot of people, even in conversations that I have, when it comes to defining what does entrepreneur mean, a lot of people actually do not accept the fact that they are a freelancer, whether they are a creative designer or a consultant. Some people don't really define it as an entrepreneur. When they think of entrepreneur, they think of someone who's launching this big multi-employee business. But to your point, if you are on your own and you're invoicing, you're providing valuable solutions to a problem on your own, you're an entrepreneur.
Yes, exactly.
So at this point, so that's when you stepped out on your own, you started to, as you quote, reinvent yourself. Was that pretty much the kind of the launch pad to your first book, Reinventing You, and kind of really documenting your own personal journey?
So I didn't necessarily initially start out thinking, oh, I'm going to, write a book about, sparked by my own experiences. It was something that I did, but I didn't necessarily think of it as book worthy. But what happened was in 2010, I started blogging for the Harvard Business Review. And prior to that, I had really wanted to write a book. It was a longstanding goal for me, and I had a lot of different ideas. One of them, probably the one that I was most excited about, was having worked on a presidential campaign. I was really interested in the idea of writing a book about what business people could learn from politics and political campaigns about how to communicate more effectively. I thought that would be a really interesting book, but which I guess is debatable. But anyway, I thought I would. But what was not debatable was that no one wanted to publish it. Largely, I mean, maybe because of the content, but largely it was the response that I got was, you know what? Sorry, you're just not famous enough. You don't have a so-called platform that would enable us to want to take a chance on you. And so that was really frustrating for me. And I realized that all the goals that I had, this idea of, I want to publish a book and I want to do it, fast, that was going to have to wait. I would need to go back to square one and do this platform building. And so for me, having been a print journalist, the logical place to look to do that was blogging. And so I started assiduously seeking places to blog. The first one that I was able to land was the Huffington Post. But they're not so much of a business publication. And so I wanted to find something that was more businessy. And so I kept looking and kept trying to break in different places. And finally, I was able to start writing for the Harvard Business Review.
Oh, wow.
And it turned out that the second post that I ever wrote for them, I mean, it wasn't really meant to be like, oh, this is my big statement, but it just happened to be a post that I wrote, was called How to Reinvent Yourself Professionally. And I thought, this is an interesting topic. It's something I know a little bit about. Let me just do something. And it turned out that the post was really well received. HBR thought that it kind of tapped into a pool of interest that was out there. And so they asked me if I would expand the blog post into a magazine-length article of about 2,500 words. And so I did that. And then when it came out, I mean, literally the week it came out, I got contacted by 3 different literary agents who apparently kind of trawl Harvard Business Review for potential clients. And they said to me, hey, do you think this could be a book? Do you want to turn it into a book proposal? And so I was like, sure, yeah, let's do it. And so, the original inspiration for the blog post certainly was the fact that I had reinvented myself and had learned a few lessons along the way. But really, as it morphed and became a full book-length project, I ended up interviewing dozens of professionals who had reinvented themselves successfully and tried to create essentially a roadmap or a kind of guidebook so that people who are contemplating professional reinvention, whether it's a career change or a job change or something like that, so that they can look at this and get some inspiration and feel like they have the inside line on how to do it better and faster.
Wow, that is a really great and inspirational story. Your first blog venture was the Huffington Post and then the Harvard Business Review. I mean, that's beyond what many people even achieve. This is even before you even started your own personal blog. Is that correct? Or had you already start blogging on your own domain?
Yeah, I had started blogging on my own domain. I didn't, in all honesty, I didn't really do it that seriously,
right.
But it's a useful starting point to have your own blog. I mean, these days, actually, something that I recommend for people who are just starting out and kind of want to get their feet wet is that they can blog on LinkedIn, which is really handy because you don't even have to bother setting up the infrastructure of your own blog
right.
if you just want to do periodic posts. But you need something so that you'll have clips to show these potential editors. I mean, clearly I had been a journalist, so I had newspaper clips, but it was things usually like political coverage, so it wasn't quite relevant. You need to have articles that you can show them that are similar in style to the ones that you'd be writing for their outlet, so that they can see if it's a good fit or if they like your style. And so in order to do that, I created my own blog and put some stuff up there. But really my goal pretty rapidly was, rather than building my own blog presence, I wanted to get seen on other outlets because I thought that that would increase my profile and build my platform faster than I could do on my own, because really the goal was a book deal.
Yeah, and that's what happened. You got a book deal out of that. So that was a great strategy. So let's really dig into your latest book, which is, again, a favorite of mine. I love the book. I have both the physical and the audible version because I'm an audio guy.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yes, because I like to listen and read while I drive.
That's what we want everyone to do.
Exactly.
2 copies.
So stand out, how to find your breakthrough idea and build a following around it. Tell us a little bit about the principles behind the book. And I'm curious to hear a little bit about the people you interviewed for the book.
Yeah, so the reason that I was interested in Standout, this was something that was a topic of great interest to me personally, and I certainly hoped it would be of interest to other readers as well, because for me, in writing Reinventing You, that was an important first step, but I felt like to a certain extent, it's kind of a 101, right? It's like, how do you reinvent yourself if you're not totally satisfied with your job or where you are, in your career? How do you reinvent yourself so you get yourself to that place? That's a really important thing. That's a really important first step. But then once you get there, it's like, well, what do you do?
Right.
What is the after once you are in a career that you love or once you are in a job that you love? How do you then establish yourself as being one of the best? How do you establish yourself as an expert or as a go-to person or as someone who is really, really valuable in your company? Because the world is increasingly competitive and we can't afford to be anymore just, average or just, one of the people, because that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for, being laid off, as I experienced, or it's a recipe for, people outsourcing and looking for a cheaper option. You have to make sure that your employer or your consulting clients or whoever you're dealing with understands perfectly why they are working with you specifically rather than some alternative lower priced option. And so that's where the idea for Standout came from. Was how do you really excel in your field, and what does that look like? So I interviewed about 50 top thought leaders, a lot of people from the business realm, because I was particularly interested in that, and that was my background. But also, everybody from real estate agents and urban planners to scientists and bicycle advocates.
Wow, that's pretty variety of industries there.
Yeah, I really wanted to look at it to see if there were common denominators
Right.
and things that everybody was doing. And so writing the book was my attempt to systematize it, much akin to Reinventing You,
Mm-hmm.
so that people could look at that and say, oh, here are some really good ideas. Here is, a kind of formula that I can follow to be able to put myself in the best possible position.
So, what are those common denominators that you did uncover based on cross industry, cross discipline that really stands out, no pun intended, in the book?
Yes. So, really broadly speaking, the most important thing when it comes to becoming a recognized expert is that there are two pieces to it. The first is that you have to be known for your ideas, right? There has to be substance to what you're doing. And so consequently, the first piece and what I devote the first half of the book to is how do you come up with the ideas that you're going to be known for and associated with? So that's really the first crucial element, and I'm glad to break that down. I came up with 5 common strategies. This is not to say that you have to do all 5 of these. This is really much more of a smorgasbord approach where each person, each professional should look at, maybe 1 or 2 areas that seem most relevant to their field, most relevant to their personality and their approach, and choose those and go deep on those. And if you do that, that can help make you really successful. The second piece that everyone had in common was that if you're going to be a recognized expert, you absolutely cannot just focus on the ideas and hole up in the ivory tower and just assume that, oh, I had this great idea, it'll magically spread. You have to be willing to share your idea publicly and to become a bit of an ambassador for it. You have to be willing to get real with people and engage in a type of marketing for it. If you don't do that, if we look at the phrase thought leader, you can't be a thought leader if you don't have followers by definition. And so you have to be willing to engage in the public sphere. But if you do that, your ideas can actually have the greatest chance of spreading and of having the kind of impact that they deserve.
Well, I like that. You can't be a thought leader unless you have followers. That's such an amazing point, an important point, because a lot of people that want to be thought leaders, a lot of times they work in silos and they have all these ideas, as you mentioned, but there's that certain hesitation of really putting your ideas out in the world, which really brings me and us to the conversation really of Gen Xers, because as we know, our generation, especially within the workforce, many Gen Xers, whether they are 35, 45, they're in middle management, they're starting to feel a little hesitant because, as you know, the big conversation in the sphere is all about millennials, which is important. And I always tell everyone, what my passion is never about like tearing down and belittling the importance of millennials, because you cannot avoid that, but it's more of elevating and amplifying the strength of the Gen Xers. And so in the workforce, millennials are coming in, they are coming into entry-level positions and approaching middle management. So you have that 35 or 40-year-old, whether you're a manager or a director, or you're feeling worried about your job, you're worried about layoffs, or you're even worried about how can I be a more effective leader to that millennial. So what advice would you give that's applicable to stand out, to tell that Gen Xer who's in upper management that needs to reinvent themselves as a leader and become more effective so they can really maximize their influence?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the big challenge for Gen Xers, and I'm 36, I count myself squarely in the ranks, is that we're the smallest generation, and
Right.
so we don't get that much ink in terms of people talking about it. But also, really, what has happened is, because of the financial crisis, baby boomers who quote unquote should be retiring are not able to retire, even if they want to.
Right.
And so they're hanging on, trying to earn more money for retirement. Also, of course, healthcare is improving. People are living longer, so that many of them don't even want to retire. And so the kind of stair step promotions that happened in the past. And, I think happened to baby boomers as a matter of course. Just that, of course you're going to be promoted. Of course, when you're 35, you're here. And at 40, you're here. And at 45, you're there. That's not happening anymore. There's a wall. There's like a brick wall of baby boomers who are hanging on to the bitter end.
Hanging on.
Yeah. And meanwhile, you've got millennials who are coming up in the ranks. They are, I think that any attempt, of course, to generalize about generations is risky. But one of the critiques of millennials that you hear is, oh, they're so entitled. They want it all, like right now. Right. And I think that's certainly not true of everybody. But let's assume, broadly speaking, for a moment, that it is true. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that they are pushing hard. It means that they are actively looking for opportunities to advance, and they are not sitting back and waiting their turn. Right. They are trying to compete for the roles and assignments that we as Gen Xers want. And odds are the way that they are competing is a little bit different. They know that they can't compete head on with us based on experience because, they're going to lose. We've got 5 years, 10 years, 15 years on them. They will always lose if it's based on experience. So instead, they're coming in through the side door and they're competing on, I have more up-to-date ideas. We can do this on a mobile platform and I'm a digital native or, right. Whatever it is. Right. So it does, yet again, it puts Gen X in a squeezed position. And so what is the only antidote here? Well, it is absolutely fundamentally not to sit back and wait and try to get noticed. This is the advice that, our well-meaning parents or grandparents might give. And that's great advice for 20 years ago or 40 years ago. It is horrifyingly bad advice for today. Because if you sit back and are not actively thinking about these things and addressing them and trying to, to find your own strategy for advancement, it is not going to happen. You are not going to have people magically noticing you or magically looking out for you. One of the things I talk about in Reinventing You, in fact, is the decline of mentorship in the workplace. That what we have essentially because of increased financial pressures in corporations or professional service firms is that a lot of the people who typically would have been the mentor figures, let's say the 62-year-old law firm partner or whatever, right. 20, 30 years ago, great. He'd still be, taking in lots of money, but now he wants to give back. He wants to mentor the next generation, and they let him do it. Nowadays, if you're still going to be pulling in 6 figures or even, 7 figures as a senior executive or a senior law firm partner, there is no way in the world they're going to let you get away with, quote unquote, spending your time mentoring younger people who might leave. You are going to have to be a rainmaker and you are going to have to justify that salary. There's no time for mentorship. And so as a result, as Gen Xers, we are largely left on our own to figure it out. So one of the themes I talk about, I have kind of a whole chapter on this in Reinventing You, is the idea of forming your own mentor board of directors, where you take people from different walks of life. They could be older, but they might be peers, they might even be junior people. And instead of taking one perfect person that you want to learn everything from, which pretty much doesn't exist anymore. You maybe take 5 people or even 10 people and you say, what is the one thing that really interests me about this person? What did they do really well? What can I learn from them? And just find opportunities to spend more time with them or surround yourself with them, and also find ways to give back. So, maybe one of your friends, Adrian, says, you know what, I was thinking of starting a podcast. Adrian does a really cool job. I want to learn about that from him. And, so that's, you can be a mentor in that regard. That's powerful. But bottom line here, Gen X needs to seize the reins. If you are not standing out in the workforce it is a critical mistake, because that is the ultimate form of job security, is having a strong personal brand, being known for a certain area of expertise, and making sure that people understand that hey, in this realm, you are the expert, you are the go-to person, and that's a reason why they should be promoting you, putting you forward, and looking to you for advice, rather than saying, oh, well, she's pretty interchangeable.
Did you hear that, everybody? Seize the reins. And Gen Xers, it's a great point. And you mentioned earlier about how within the workforce competing, I mean, the millennials cannot compete when it comes to experience, but they can compete on, like you said, being closer to the digital platforms. But the key point you mentioned is to build that network, working with millennials directly, learning from them, have them learn from you as a Gen Xer based on your experience. But you can't be reticent and left largely on our own, as you said, to figure it out. We're the quintessential latchkey generation, so we're used to that.
Yes,
we're used to that. But again, I think that opens the door also, even at looking at these new platforms, as a Gen X leader or middle manager, and maybe looking to start your own business and looking at your own passions. And now the tools are in place that, let's say back when we were the quote unquote millennials in the 90s and the boomers were looking to start their businesses, they didn't have the tools and the content and the platforms to do that. So to your point, I think there's a lot of opportunities that now that this Gen X generation has to really define their brand and build their future.
Absolutely.
So wrapping up, Dorie, this has been great. There are two questions that I want to ask you that I ask all of my guests at the end of the show. That's the first one is very relevant when it comes to personal branding. Dorie, so if there was a song that would play every time you entered a room or when you walked down the street that fits that story of Dorie Clark and your brand, what song would that be? Basically, what would be your own personal theme song and why?
Yeah, I love the question. I think it's great. And in fact, having worked in politics, this is a question that politicians have to answer all the time.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be hearing a lot of theme songs in the next couple of years, I'm sure, 18 months.
Yeah, and then you always get great sort of conflicts when they pick a theme song and then the artist is like, no, sorry, I hate you. You can't use this.
Oh, yeah. That just happened, actually.
But no, probably my pick. There is a band that I have loved for a long time. I've been a fan of theirs since about 2000 or 2001. Actually, back still when I was a reporter. And they're called Tegan and Sarah. They're twin sisters from Canada, and they have a great song called "Proud," which is just kind of this rockin' song about taking pride in yourself. And I think it's a good anthem for all of us.
Oh, I love that. Tegan and Sarah Proud.
Yes.
All right. We'll put a link in the show notes as well to any YouTube videos or iTunes or what have you. And then lastly, Dorie, if there was one specific tool or resource, whether it's a mobile app, website, book, etc., that you recommend, especially for Gen Xers that are looking to further define their personal development, market their own brand or business, or stand out and build a following, what would that be?
Yeah, so many good opportunities here and things to cite. I would say, if we're talking about apps and things like that, I'll answer it in a few different ways. Okay. So number one, I'll this is not so much about personal branding, but it's one that I use all the time, and maybe you do too. TripIt. And there's a paid version called TripIt Pro. Is just the most amazing business travel app.
Yeah, I haven't heard of that one. TripIt?
Yeah, okay. It's really fantastic if you have a job, as I do, where you're on the road a lot. Right. What's nice about it is that when you get the confirmation after you've booked a hotel or a flight or rental car or something, you forward it to an email address at TripIt once you've set up your account, and it'll aggregate it all in one place so that when you open the app, you don't have to say, oh, this time was I using Hertz or Budget or Avis or blah, blah, blah. Like, it gets so confusing. It sucks all the information out. It puts it in one place. And so you can see it broken down by trip. So it's like, oh, well, when you're going to Cincinnati, you're taking this flight. You're at this hotel. You're using this rental car service. And it's if you travel a lot, it is very, very helpful. So that is one that I use all the time.
I love that. TripIt. I'm going to have to check that out. today, actually.
Another a service that I've actually just learned about, a friend of mine named Dan Schaubel, who is an author and
the millennial guy.
Exactly.
Yes.
He's an advisor for this organization, and so he clued me into it. But it's called Branded.me,
okay,
and they are a service that allows people very, very rapidly, with like a click, basically, to make their own personal website that extracts the information from your LinkedIn profile. So it's very easy to do. And that's kind of cool. So I'll mention that in terms of a specific tool related to personal branding. And then finally, Adrian, the thing that I'll mention that might be of interest to your listeners is if folks out there are interested in developing their own breakthrough ideas and the ideas that they'll be known for and figuring out how to build a following around them, I actually have a free resource I wanted to mention.
Okay.
On my website. I have it where you can download for free a 42-page workbook that I created, adapted from Stand Out.
Oh, cool.
And
Cool.
It's a series of questions that leads you step by step through the process of developing your own ideas and getting them known. So folks can go to my website, DorieClark.com, which is DorieClark.com, and they can download it for free there.
Oh, that's awesome. A free resource. Just download it, go to your website, and that would get you on their path of standing out. I love that. I was just going to ask you, how would you tell our guests, our listeners, the best way to find out more about your business? So I'm assuming first is your website, as you mentioned, DorieClark.com.
Absolutely. Yes. I have, for folks who really want to go in depth, I have more than 400 free articles
okay.
on the website that I've written. And then, of course, there's the Standout Workbook. So I'd encourage them to check that out. And I'm also on Twitter, at Dorie Clark.
Cool. At Dorie Clark, Twitter, Standout Workbook, Standout. Dorie, it's been a blast. It's always great to talk to a fellow Gen X leader such as yourself. And thanks so much for taking the time to share your story with us, with the Gen X Amplify community.
Hey, thank you so much, Adrian. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. All right. That was Dorie Clark with episode number 2. Great conversation. I really enjoyed my chat with her. And if you haven't read her book, Stand Out, you should go check it out. Again, the title is called Stand Out: How to Find Your Breakthrough Idea and Build a Following Around It. And while you're there, if you should check out her first book, Reinventing You: Define Your Brand, Imagine Your Future. If you really enjoyed the episode, go over to genxamplified.com. Check out get the show notes there. And it's actually genxamplified.com/002 for episode 2. And there again, you will find the show notes and the links to many of the resources we talked about during the episode, such as her personal website at DorieClark.com. Also, some of those platforms and resources that she mentioned, such as TripIt and Branded.me. But go over to the show notes. You'll see the links there. And don't forget to go over to iTunes and give your honest rating and review for the podcast. I accept 5-star ratings, no less. I'm just kidding. Be honest. But I hope you enjoyed the show. And don't forget to come back. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Go and subscribe on iTunes, or if you're right there, you can subscribe. If you're listening in, you can subscribe straight from your mobile device. And there you can get all the episodes sent directly to you as soon as they are released. And also, don't forget to go over to my personal website at adrianporter.com. There you would see more content, blog posts, and feel free to join my email newsletter. I trust that I would try to provide as much valuable content to you as I can. So again, thank you for listening in. I really appreciate it. And until next time, all the best to your success. Take care.